The weight of being. Ilara lived in the quiet hum of an ordinary world, a librarian by profession, surrounded by the silent stories of countless lives. To an outsider, she was a study in gentle normalcy, precise movements, a soft-spoken demeanor, eyes that held a peculiar, distant warmth. Yet, beneath the calm surface, a profound and pervasive current flowed, a desire so fundamental, so deeply ingrained, that it colored every breath she took. It wasn't a wish for death, not in the desperate, agonizing sense, but a profound yearning for an undoing. A desire to simply have never been. Imagine a tapestry, intricately woven with threads of joy and sorrow, connection and loss. Ilara felt as though she was a thread mistakenly added, a stray strand that, while not actively harming the pattern, simply didn't belong. Her existence, to her, was an arbitrary imposition, a spontaneous combustion of cells and consciousness that had somehow, inexplicably, happened. And the purest, most secret desire of her heart was for that spark to have remained unignited. This wasn't born of suffering in the conventional sense. Her childhood was unremarkable, her family loving enough, her life devoid of grand tragedies. Instead, it was an innate, existential weariness. A constant, low-frequency hum of exhaustion that came from the sheer effort of being. She would watch others, friends, colleagues, strangers on the street laughing, striving, mourning, connecting with an intensity she could only observe from a distance. Their vibrant threads seemed so perfectly integrated into the tapestry, while hers felt loose. She remembered a moment from her early childhood, perhaps 5 or 6. She was sitting in a sunbeam, watching dust motes dance. Suddenly, an overwhelming awareness of her own small self, her own consciousness, had swept over her, coupled with a bewildering question. Why am I here? Not why was I put here, but why did I come into existence at all? The thought had been too large for her young mind, quickly dismissed by the demands of play, but the seed had been planted. It grew quietly, blossoming into a pervasive feeling that wasn't despair, but a quiet, constant longing for the peace of non-being. Every morning, the world reasserted its demands. The gentle weight of her duvet, the first scent of coffee, the list of tasks for the day, each sensation was a subtle reminder of her unavoidable presence. Social gatherings were the most taxing. She'd practice smiles in the mirror, rehearse conversational openers, striving for an imitation of engagement. It felt like a performance, a benevolent masquerade, where she was an actress playing the role of someone who genuinely wanted to be there, who cherished existence as others seemed to. The energy it consumed was immense, leaving her drained, yearning for the solitary quiet of her apartment, where the illusion could drop. Her true sanctuaries were places where she could feel closest to an imagined nothingness. The hushed aisles of the library after closing, the deserted park paths just before dawn, or, most profoundly, her small balcony under the vast, indifferent expanse of the night sky. There, among the incountable stars, she felt her own insignificance not as a terror, but as a balm. The sheer scale of the cosmos made her own existence seem so fleeting, so minuscule, so utterly dispensable, and in that perceived dispensability, she found a strange, paradoxical comfort. It was the closest she came to the unmaking she craved. The unseen threads. One crisp autumn morning, the seemingly small event that often sharpens such internal states occurred. A finch, startled by something unseen, flew directly into her living room window with a soft, sickening thud. Ilara rushed to it, finding the small bird stunned, twitching faintly on the sill. She gently cupped it in her hands, its tiny heart fluttering against her palm. She stayed there for a long time, willing it back to life, the fragile warmth of its body a stark contrast to the cold glass. When, after several minutes, it stirred, righted itself, and with a flutter of wings, darted away, a wave of profound sorrow washed over her. Not for the bird's near demise, but for its inherent vulnerability, its susceptibility to pain. And a similar wave for herself, and for all sentient beings. Why must there be this fragility, this endless dance of seeking and losing, this capacity for suffering that came with the very act of existing? The desire for non-existence sharpened, coalescing into a clear thought. If she had never been, she could never cause accidental harm, never experience the ache of witnessing pain, never contribute to the intricate web of cause and effect that defined existence. She began to document her feelings, not in a traditional diary, but in a private journal filled with abstract sketches and sparse, almost cryptic notes. It wasn't a cry for help, she didn't want intervention. It was an attempt to understand this unique burden, this constant, almost nostalgic longing for a state she had never known. The sketches were of empty spaces, of dissolved forms, of figures fading into shadow, of the elegant simplicity of a single line against a vast, blank canvas. Life, however, continued to weave its contrasting threads around her. There was Liam, a fellow librarian from the children's section. Liam, with his infectious laugh and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he spoke of his weekend plans, hiking trips, family barbecues, volunteer work at the animal shelter. He was full of life, bursting with it, always planning for the future, always eager for the next experience. He'd ask Alara about her own plans, and she'd offer vague answers, a small smile masking the vast chasm between their perspectives. She observed him, not with envy, but with a pang of something unidentifiable, a sense of fundamental difference, as if they were two species evolved for different planets, one thriving on gravity, the other yearning for weightlessness. Then there was Anya. An elderly woman, a regular at the library, always requesting large print books on gardening. One rainy afternoon, Alara saw Anya struggling outside the library, her canvas bag overflowing with books, a heavy umbrella slipping from her grasp. Without thinking, Alara rushed out, helping Anya gather her things and walk her to her car. Anya's gratitude was immediate and effusive. "Bless you, dear," she'd said, her eyes crinkling kindly. "You're an angel." The interaction was brief, simple, undeniably good. Yet, afterwards, Alara felt strangely drained. It was as if the act of being present, of connecting and helping, however minimal, took immense effort. The fleeting warmth of Anya's hand on her arm, the shared moment of simple human kindness, they solidified her yearning for non-being. If she weren't here, there would be no need for her to help, and no need for Anya to struggle. It was a strange logic, twisted by her unique lens, but it was deeply felt. Alara began to withdraw further, not in despair or despondency, but in a state of deep, quiet contemplation. Her quietness became even more pronounced, a choice rather than a default. She spent more time in her sanctuaries, seeking a state of pure observation, trying to dissolve her ego, herself, to shed the layers of individuality that felt so burdensome. She read. She sought out texts on Eastern philosophy, particularly the Buddhist concept of shunyata, or emptiness, and ancient Greek philosophies that touched on the nature of being and non-being. She delved into nihilism, not as an ideology to adopt, but as a framework to understand the apparent meaninglessness of existence. Was this desire a flaw? A sickness of the mind? Or a profound, almost mystical insight into the true nature of reality, stripped bare of human illusions? The surprising lack of fear when contemplating non-being was a key element. It felt like coming home, not to a physical place, but to a state of ultimate peace. Her art, which had always been a private outlet, became even more central to her exploration. It evolved from representational forms to stark, abstract compositions. She worked primarily in ink and charcoal, focusing on negative space, on the forms created by the absence of line, on the interplay of light and shadow where shadows seemed to swallow form. Her canvases became visual meditations on dissolution, on the gentle erasure of identity, on the profound beauty of the void. There were shapes that suggested crumbling, fading, or dissolving entirely, leaving only echoes. There were moments of profound loneliness, but it wasn't the kind that yearned for company. It was a loneliness for the absence of the self that desired connection in the first place. A paradox, she knew, but one she lived within. She saw the vast, interconnected web of life, the suffering and the joy, the struggle and the triumph, and she wished, with a quiet, persistent longing, to be outside of it, a silent witness to its unfolding, untouched by its currents. To be a ghost before her time, not haunting, but simply not existing. The acceptance. The turning point came during an unexpected late-night documentary on deep space. The screen showed shimmering nebulae, galaxies spiraling into vast, silent voids, and then, a simulated trajectory of a lone asteroid, hurtling through the cosmic dark. As the narrator spoke of immeasurable distances and ancient, dying stars, a profound sensory experience washed over Alara. It wasn't a religious epiphany, nor a sudden burst of joy. It was an overwhelming sense of scale, a force that dwarfed all human existence, all earthly struggles, all individual desires. In that moment, she felt simultaneously insignificant and utterly, fundamentally connected to something vast, indifferent, and incomprehensibly old. In the face of such cosmic indifference, her desire to have never been born didn't vanish. How could it? It was a part of her fabric. But it transformed. She saw it not as a flaw, not as a burden, but as a unique lens through which she perceived reality. This pervasive longing, this quiet yearning for non-existence, allowed her to see the world with an acute, almost painful clarity. It allowed her to see the preciousness of every fleeting moment, the profound, almost absurd beauty in small acts of kindness, the raw, exquisite fragility of life itself. Precisely because she saw the alternative, the infinite, peaceful void, so clearly, the choice to be here, however unwished for by her deepest self, became a conscious, albeit quiet, act of witness. She understood that her existence, however arbitrary it might have felt at its inception, was. And within that undeniable isness, there was space for this desire. It didn't have to paralyze her, it could refine her vision. It wasn't about escaping life, but about deeply experiencing it from a vantage point few others possessed. Ilara began to integrate this understanding into her daily life. Her quietness was no longer about detachment, but about profound observation. She listened more intently, she watched with a new depth of focus, noticing the subtle shifts in light, the nuances in a stranger's voice, the quiet resilience of a plant growing through a crack in the pavement. Her acts of kindness, like helping Anya, were now infused with a deeper empathy born from seeing the world as a fragile, precious, and perhaps utterly unnecessary gift. She saw the effort it took for others to simply be, and she recognized the shared struggle, even if her own personal longing was for its cessation. Her art, too, changed again. It still incorporated the void, the shadows, the vast emptiness she felt drawn to. But now, vibrant, transient forms of life began to appear within them. A single, delicate flower blooming from a crack in a seemingly endless wall, a fleeting ray of light piercing through a dense, dark forest, the faint outline of a human figure emerging from a wash of ink. It was about light and shadow, presence and absence, a dialogue between what is and what is not. The story of Ilara does not end with her suddenly finding joy or a passionate love for life. That would be an untruth to her unique spirit. Instead, it ends with a profound, poignant acceptance. The desire to have never been born remains a quiet hum, a fundamental part of her being, woven into the very fabric of who she is. But it no longer weighs her down. It no longer feels like a burden. Instead, it illuminates the world for her in a way others cannot see, making her a unique witness to the grandeur and tragedy of existence. She found her purpose, not in grand achievements or loud declarations, but in simply being and observing, with eyes unclouded by the ordinary assumptions of existence, seeing the profound beauty in every fleeting moment of a life she never asked for, yet now quietly, profoundly, inhabited.